I want you to close your eyes for a second and picture the internet. Not the apps on your phone, not the cloud icon on the slide deck. I mean the actual physical thing. If you strip away all the screens and the software, what are you actually left with?
You're left with the plumbing. You're left with thousands of miles of fiber optic cable, copper wiring, and server rooms that are just kept at freezing temperatures. And inside those rooms, you've got racks of humming, blinking metal boxes.
Exactly. And for the last, 30 years, if you walked into one of those server rooms, doesn't matter if it's a bank in London or a school district in Ohio, you were almost guaranteed to see one specific logo on those boxes, that stylized Golden Gate Bridge, Cisco.
Oh, yeah. They are the undisputed heavyweights of hardware. They built the roads that the digital economy drives on.
But here's the problem with being the guy who builds the roads or installs the plumbing. Traditionally, you only get paid once. You sell the pipe, you install it, and that's it. You don't get paid every time someone flushes a toilet or drives a car. And in the modern tech world, where Wall Street is just obsessed with recurring revenue and software subscriptions, being a hardware company is a dangerous place to be.
It is. It's the classic innovator's dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
You have this massive, incredibly successful business selling physical things. But the world is moving to software. If you don't change, you become a dinosaur. But if you do change, if you start selling software instead of boxes, you risk cannibalizing the very revenue that made you a giant in the first place.
And that is the tightrope walk we're unpacking today. We are looking at a really detailed case study of Cisco's strategic evolution from, say, 2010 to right now. This is the story of how a company famous for selling boxes managed to reinvent itself into a software and services powerhouse.
And what makes this so interesting is that we're not just looking at the marketing fluff. We're digging into the financial reports, the internal friction with their partners, and the specific mechanics of how they pulled this off. We're going to look at how they built a $23 billion recurring revenue fortress without blowing up their core business.
Essentially, how do you change the engines on a 747 while you're still flying it across the Atlantic?
And hopefully land with more fuel than you started with.
So let's set the scene. We need to go back to the old world. It's 2010. The iPad is just launched. The cloud is still something people are trying to define. Where does Cisco stand at this point?
In 2010, Cisco is a hardware juggernaut. If you were a chief information officer, your relationship with them was very transactional. You bought a router, you bolted it into a rack, and you expected it to run for 5, maybe 7 years. You paid Cisco a big check up front, and then they essentially went away until you needed an upgrade.
But they did have a services division back then, right? I remember hearing about SMARTnet.
They did, but we need to be clear about what service meant in 2010. It wasn't, strategic consulting. It was insurance. SMARTnet was basically a break-fix warranty. If a fan blew out in your switch at 3 a.m., you called Cisco, and they sent a guy with a screwdriver and a new part.
So it's reactive. It's break glass in case of emergency.
Right. But, and here's the first major insight from our research that people often miss, that boring warranty business was secretly the financial anchor of the entire company. Even in 2010, services brought in $7.6 billion. That was nearly 20% of their total revenue.
20% is significant, but I'm guessing the margins were the real story. I mean, manufacturing hardware is expensive, but selling a warranty is pretty cheap.
You hit the nail on the head. Hardware margins are always under pressure. You have competitors like Huawei entering the market with cheaper boxes, driving prices down. So hardware gross margins hovered in the low 60s, sometimes high 50s. But services, that's pure profit territory. Service margins were consistently in the mid to high 60s.
So effectively, the service business was subsidizing the hardware wars. The warranty money was funding the R&D to build the next router.
Precisely. It stabilized the earnings. Hardware sales are cyclical. They boom when the economy is good and corporations are expanding, and they bust when it tightens up. Maintenance contracts are steady. They act as a shock absorber. But around 2012, 2013, Cisco leadership realized that steady just wasn't enough. They were sitting on a gold mine of data they weren't using.
This is the shift to what they called smart services. But I have to ask, was this just a fancy name for, we're going to charge you more for the same support?
Well, that's the cynical view, but technically it was a massive shift in mechanics. They moved from reactive to proactive. I mean, think about it. Cisco has millions of devices running the world's internet traffic. They realized that if they could analyze the telemetry data coming off those devices, they could predict failures before they happened.
So instead of waiting for me to call them screaming that the network is down, they call me and say, hey, your router's about to overheat.
Exactly. They started building call home features into the software. By 2013 and 2014, the stats were just staggering. Cisco claimed they were automating 88% of all service activity.
Wait, 88%? That seems impossibly high.
It does sound high, but think about what that means. It means the software identifies a bug, matches it to a known issue in a global database, and sometimes even patches it or automatically dispatches a replacement part without a human engineer ever picking up a phone.
That's incredible efficiency for Cisco, but doesn't that create a massive conflict of interest? Cisco relies on a huge network of partners' value-added resellers to sell and install this stuff. If Cisco automates the troubleshooting, aren't they just taking money out of their partners' pockets?
That was the friction point. You are absolutely right. Cisco has thousands of partners who made their living on billable hours fixing this gear. If Cisco automates the fix, the partners lose revenue. There was a lot of fear in the channel.
So how do they not face a mutiny?
They had to realign the incentives. In 2014, they launched the Cisco Services Partner Program. They consolidated about 50 different fragmented partner programs into one, and the pitch was essentially, if you sell these smart services, we will share the recurring revenue with you.
Ah, the profit-sharing peace treaty.
Exactly. And they argued that it created stickiness. If a partner is managing the health of a client's network using Cisco's automated tools, that client is never going to leave them for a competitor. It locked the customer in, which benefited both Cisco and the partner.
Okay, so that lays the foundation. They have the high margins, they have the automation, and they've pacified the partners. But then we hit 2015, Chuck Robbins takes over as CEO, and the vibe changes completely.
The mid-2010s are the pivot point. The market was screaming for flexibility. Companies like Amazon and Microsoft were teaching CIOs that they didn't need to own servers, they could just rent capacity in the cloud. The idea of buying a $50,000 router and being stuck with it for 7 years started to feel archaic.
So Robbins recognizes they need to pivot to software. But how do you actually do that when your main product is a metal box? You can't just download a router.
You unbundle. This is the concept of Cisco ONE, which they rolled out during this period. Historically, the software, the operating system that made the router work was tied to the serial number of that specific metal box. You throw out the box, you lose the software.
Which, if you think about it, is just crazy. It's like buying a laptop and having to buy a new copy of Windows every time you get a new battery.
Right. So Cisco ONE decoupled it. They said, buy the software suite as a subscription. It's portable. If you upgrade the hardware, you keep your software license.
That sounds great for the customer. It offers flexibility. But for Cisco, isn't that risky? If I'm not forced to buy the software every time I buy a box, doesn't their revenue drop?
In the short term, maybe. But the long-term play is lock-in. And the masterstroke came in 2017 with the launch of the Catalyst 9000 switch series. This is probably the single most important product launch in this entire story.
Why? A switch is a switch, isn't it? It moves data from point A to point B.
Not this one. Because for the first time, Cisco made the subscription mandatory. You physically could not buy the Catalyst 9000, their flagship enterprise product, without signing up for the Cisco DNA software subscription.
Wow, that is bold. That's telling your biggest customers, you want our best hardware. You have to pay us rent on the intelligence inside it. Forever. Did customers revolt?
There was grumbling, for sure. No one likes a new monthly bill. But Cisco had a precedent that gave them confidence. Meraki.
Right, Meraki. They bought them back in 2012.
And Meraki's model was radical. If you stop paying the subscription on a Meraki device, the hardware literally stops passing traffic. It becomes a paperweight.
Which sounds like a hostage situation.
It does, but enterprise customers actually loved it because the cloud management was just so good, it just worked. Meraki proved that companies would accept a 100% subscription model if the experience was superior. By 2015, Meraki was running at a $740 million annual revenue rate. That success gave Cisco the confidence to say, okay, we can do this with the Big Iron too. We can do this with the Catalyst series.
And financially, it worked.
Immediately. In the fourth quarter of 2017, just after this push, they reported over $1 billion in recurring revenue, 11% of their product revenue. That was the moment the line between product and service blurred permanently.
But here's the catch with subscriptions. If I sell you a box, I have your money. Deal done. If I sell you a subscription, you can cancel next year. You can walk away.
Bingo. And this leads us to the cultural shift from 2018 to 2020. This is the part that isn't about technology, it's about psychology. In a subscription world, you have to win the customer's business every single renewal cycle.
You can't just be a sales organization anymore. You have to be a retention organization.
Yeah, exactly. They rebranded their entire organization to Customer Experience, or CX. They realized that if a customer buys the fancy Cisco DNA software but never installs it, which happens a lot in enterprise IT, they're going to churn. They're going to look at that bill in 3 years and say, why are we paying for this? And cancel.
So how did they fix that? Did they just send more emails?
No, they created entirely new job roles. They introduced success tracks and lifecycle advisors.
Lifecycle advisor. That sounds like a therapist for your network.
In a way, they are. Their entire job is to hold the customer's hand after the sale. Onboarding, implementation, optimization. They look at the telemetry and say, hey, I see you bought the security package, but you haven't turned on the advanced firewall features. Let's get that set up for you.
Because if they use the features, they get the value.
Yep.
And if they get the value, they renew the check.
It is that simple. And speaking of security, that was the rocket fuel for this era. Security products like Duo and Umbrella, which they acquired, are native subscriptions. You have to pay recurring fees for security because the threat landscape changes every day. By 2021, security subscription revenue was growing at 18% a year.
So we've gone from break fix to unbundled software to customer success, and now we're in the 2020s, the era of everything as a service. This is where it gets really futuristic and maybe a little confusing for the average person.
This is the launch of Cisco Plus in 2021. The concept is Network as a Service, or NaaS.
Explain NaaS to me. Is this like the utility model?
Exactly like the utility model.
Yeah.
Imagine you're a CFO. You don't want to own $10 million worth of routers. You don't want to manage them on your balance sheet. You don't want to worry about depreciating them over 5 years. You just want connectivity. Cisco Plus allows you to pay for outcomes, secure Wi-Fi, hybrid cloud storage on a usage basis. Cisco owns the gear. You just pay for the data flowing through the pipes.
So I don't own the power plant. I just pay the electric bill.
Precisely. And to make this work, they needed one more piece of the puzzle. They needed to see outside the network. In 2020, they bought a company called ThousandEyes.
Still one of the coolest names in tech history. Sounds like a spy agency.
It does, but it's actually Google Maps for the internet. ThousandEyes monitors the performance of the external internet. See, in the modern world, your employees aren't just accessing your data center. They're on Zoom, they're on Salesforce, they're on AWS. If Zoom is lagging, your CEO yells at you, the network admin.
Even though it's not your fault, it could be Comcast or AT&T having an issue.
Right. ThousandEyes allows Cisco to say, hey, the problem isn't the switch in the basement. The problem is an ISP outage in Chicago. Integrating that network intelligence into their CX cloud was a game changer. It made the subscription incredibly valuable because it gave IT teams their sanity back.
So looking at the scoreboard for this modern era, what do the numbers look like? We talked about $1 billion back in 2017. Where are we now?
The numbers are staggering. By the third quarter of 2021, 81% of their software revenue was sold as a subscription. 81%. That is basically a full conversion.
And what about the total recurring revenue?
In fiscal year 2023, their total annualized recurring revenue, what Wall Street calls ARR, hit $23.3 billion. Recurring revenue now makes up 44% of Cisco's total revenue.
That is a massive safety net.
And it proved its worth during the recent supply chain crisis. Remember when you couldn't get a chip to save your life? Cisco couldn't ship boxes fast enough. In the old days, their revenue would have tanked because they couldn't deliver the hardware. But because they had this massive backlog of software subscriptions and deferred revenue, the company remained financially stable. The recurring revenue kept the lights on while the factories were stalled.
Okay, we've thrown a lot of billions of percentages at the listener. I want to ground this. So what? Does this shift actually make life better for a company using Cisco, or is it just a clever way for Cisco to squeeze more money out of them?
That is the ultimate question. If it's just price gouging, it won't last. We have 2 case studies in our source material that show the real operational impact. Let's start with Fiserv.
Massive fintech company. They handle money movement, so reliability is basically oxygen for them.
Correct. Fiserv had a nightmare environment. Multiple vendors, older gear, complex architecture. Their wireless stability was sitting at 56%.
56%. That's essentially a coin flip on whether you can connect to the internet. For a fintech company, that's disastrous.
It is. So they collaborated with Cisco Services, specifically using those automation and design tools we talked about earlier. They didn't just buy new boxes, they bought the outcome of stability.
And the result?
Stability went from 56% to 99%. But here is the stat that really blew my mind regarding efficiency: their configuration time. The time it takes to set up a device dropped from days to just 10 minutes.
How's that even possible?
Automation. They stopped typing code into command lines manually and started using the Smart Services software to push configs automatically. That represents weeks of man-hours saved every single month.
That's a game changer for an IT team. Days to 10 minutes. Okay, what about the second one? ANZ Bank.
This one is about speed. ANZ Bank needed to upgrade connectivity in hundreds of branches. Usually a bank branch refresh takes years. It's a logistical nightmare. They had a deadline of 12 months.
And physically swapping out gear in hundreds of locations usually leads to downtime, which banks hate.
Right. They use Cisco's success tracks. They utilize the automation tools to handle the cutover the moment you switch from the old network to the new one. And they reduce the cutover time from 8 hours per branch to just 1 hour.
So instead of the branch being offline for a full workday, it's done over a lunch break.
Exactly. And they finished the entire project in 8 months, completely ahead of schedule.
See, that's where the rubber meets the road. It's not just Cisco makes more money from subscriptions. It's the customer can actually move faster because the service is integrated.
That is the aha moment. When you integrate the software, the hardware, and the service, you aren't just selling a box. You're selling the capability to upgrade a bank in 8 months. You are selling the outcome.
So to wrap this up, we've watched Cisco go from the hardware king, relying on break-fix warranties, to a software and subscription powerhouse with $23 billion in recurring revenue.
It's a journey of competitive insulation. By embedding themselves into the customer's operations with analytics, security, and lifecycle advice, they made it very hard to leave. But more importantly, they smoothed out their own financial volatility. They turned a roller coaster business hardware sales into a steady climb.
They managed to survive the tech transition that killed so many other giants. Kodak, Blockbuster, Nokia, they all missed the pivot. Cisco didn't.
They didn't. And I'll leave you with this final thought. It's a provocation about the industry as a whole. We call this the servitization of tech. Cisco proved that even the most physical, industrial parts of IT, the literal plumbing, can be turned into a subscription service.
Which begs the question.
Right. If the plumbing of the internet is now a subscription, what does that mean for the future of ownership in enterprise IT? Are we moving to a world where companies own absolutely nothing? No servers, no routers, no code, and just subscribe to outcomes. And if so, who really controls the infrastructure of the world? The companies using it or the vendors renting it to them?
The end of ownership. That is a fascinating and slightly terrifying thought to end on. Thanks for diving in with us.
Thanks for having me.
Catch you on the next deep dive.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of our Digital Servitization Exchange podcast. We hope the insights sparked new ideas, challenged assumptions, and brought clarity to the evolving world of service and digital-driven business models. This podcast is grounded in extensive research across various fields, drawing on years of academic work, case studies, and cutting-edge publications. It also shaped by hands-on experience of our collaboration partners, whose real-world challenges and successes help us to translate theory into practice. If you enjoyed the episode, consider following the podcast and sharing it with colleagues who are navigating the civilization journey. Your support helps us continuing bridging high-quality research-based and practice-proven perspectives straight to your ears. Thank you for tuning in and see you in the next episode.